The rain drizzled softly over the naval base that evening, casting a silver sheen across the parking lot as men in uniform hurried between the barracks and the officers' club. Inside, laughter and clinking glasses filled the warm air. It was the first Friday night in months without an official duty, and the sailors were making the most of it. In a quiet corner of the mess hall, James Holt, the janitor, was mopping the floor near the entrance. He was a single dad, had been since his wife passed away 3 years ago. The janitor's uniform was worn, but neatly pressed, and his posture carried a quiet pride that made him seem out of place among the loud, joking sailors. "Hey, Holt," a voice called out. It was Petty Officer Grant, one of the younger guys. "You doing anything tonight?" James looked up, half smiling. "Just heading home to my daughter. Movie night." Grant grinned mischievously. "You sure? We've got a little something lined up for you." "A blind date." James chuckled, shaking his head. "A blind date? I think I'm a little past that stage." But the group of sailors nearby erupted in laughter, egging him on. "Come on, man, live a little. You clean the place up every night, you deserve some fun." Unknown to James, this was no genuine attempt to help him. They had set up the date as a joke, pairing him with someone they thought would embarrass him, a commanding officer's friend who, they assumed, would be horrified to find herself across the table from a janitor. "All right," James said finally, with a small grin. "But only if it doesn't get in the way of bedtime stories." The sailors whooped and cheered, already texting to confirm the setup. The next evening, James arrived at the seaside restaurant the sailors had picked. He wore his only formal shirt, a crisp white one he had saved from his Navy days long ago, before his discharge. His daughter, Emily, had ironed it for him earlier that afternoon. "You look like a movie star, Daddy," she had said, giggling as she brushed invisible dust off his shoulders. "Movie stars wish they had your stylist," he'd replied with a wink. Now, as he entered the restaurant, he felt the same awkward tightness he used to feel during inspections. He checked his watch, unsure if he was early or if his date was late. The maitre d' led him to a small table by the window, where candlelight danced on the glass. And there she was, elegant, calm, with sharp eyes softened by kindness. Her uniform jacket, draped over the back of the chair, bore the insignia of an admiral. James froze. The sailor's joke clicked into place like a cruel puzzle. They'd set him up with Admiral Catherine Pierce, the highest-ranking officer on base. "Mr. Holt, I presume," she said, standing to shake his hand. Her voice was firm, but not unkind. He swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am. I didn't realize that this was a blind date," she finished, smiling slightly. "Neither did I. Apparently, some of my officers thought they were being clever." He hesitated. "If you'd like, I can go." "I didn't mean." "Nonsense," she interrupted, gesturing to the seat across from her. "We're both here. Might as well make the best of their little prank." James sat down, his nerves slowly settling. The waiter approached, and they ordered. For a while, the conversation was cautious, light topics, safe ground. But as the evening went on, something shifted. "So," Catherine said, "how long have you been at the base?" 3 years, James replied. "Started shortly after my wife passed. Needed something stable for my daughter." Her expression softened. "I'm sorry. That must have been hard." He nodded. "It was. Still is sometimes. But Emily's tough. She keeps me going." They talked about life, about his daughter's dreams of becoming a pilot, about the long nights cleaning hangars, about the pride he still felt every time he saw the flag raised at dawn. Catherine listened intently, her eyes never leaving his. There was no mockery, no condescension, just quiet respect. When the meal ended, James insisted on paying, but she refused. "Let's call it even," she said. "They tricked us both." He smiled. "Fair enough." Outside, the rain had returned, falling softly against the pavement. She offered him a ride, and he hesitated before accepting. As they drove through the base's quiet streets, the conversation continued, flowing easily now. When they reached his small housing unit, he turned to thank her. "For what it's worth," he said, "this was the nicest surprise I've had in a long time." "Likewise, Mr. Holt," she replied, and next time those sailors tried to play matchmaker, they'll be doing push-ups until sunrise. They laughed, and he got out, watching as her car disappeared down the street. On Monday morning, the base was buzzing with whispers. The sailors who had orchestrated the prank were smirking, waiting for Holt to show up. When he entered the hangar, mop and bucket in hand, they started clapping sarcastically. "How was dinner with the Admiral, Romeo?" one called out. "She invite you to the officers' ball yet?" James just smiled faintly and went about his work. He had learned long ago that silence was stronger than anger. But that afternoon, something unexpected happened. The intercom crackled, and a voice echoed through the hangar. "All personnel report to the assembly hall immediately." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Assembly calls were rare. When everyone gathered, Admiral Pierce herself stood at the front of the room, her uniform immaculate, her expression unreadable. "As most of you know," she began, "this base prides itself on discipline, integrity, and respect. But recently, some individuals have forgotten what those words mean." The sailors shifted uncomfortably. "I was informed," she continued, "that a group of my men decided to arrange a so-called blind date, as a joke at the expense of another member of this community. What they failed to realize," her gaze swept the room, "is that the man they mocked is someone who embodies the very values they lack." She turned slightly, motioning toward the side of the stage. James froze as she looked directly at him. "Mr. Holt," she said, her tone softening, "would you please join me?" He hesitated, every eye in the hall following him as he walked up the steps. The silence was thick enough to hear the rain hitting the roof outside. "This man," Admiral Pierce said, her voice carrying through the room, "served in the Navy years ago. An aircraft mechanic who risked his life during an emergency on the USS Roosevelt to save 3 pilots trapped in a burning hangar. He received an honorable discharge after an injury, but when his wife passed away, he returned here, not as an officer, not for glory, but as a janitor, to provide for his daughter and stay close to the life he once knew." Gasps rippled through the room. The sailors who had mocked him stared at the floor. "I looked into his record last night," she continued. "And I'll tell you this, there are few people I've met in my entire career who deserve more respect than James Holt." James stood motionless, his throat tight. He hadn't expected her to say any of this. She turned to him, her voice lowering. "You've reminded me that rank and uniform mean nothing without heart. Thank you, for your service then, and for your dignity now." The hall erupted in applause, genuine and thunderous. James blinked rapidly, fighting the sting in his eyes. When it finally died down, Admiral Pierce faced the crowd again. "As for those responsible for this prank," she said sharply, "they'll be spending the next 2 weeks doing community service under Mr. Holt's supervision. Perhaps they'll learn what real leadership looks like." The guilty sailors paled, but no one dared to protest. James turned to her, his voice barely above a whisper. "Admiral, you didn't have to do that." "I did," she said simply. "Because respect must be earned, and sometimes restored." The following week, the sailors scrubbed floors beside James. At first, they avoided eye contact, their pride bruised. But slowly, something changed. They began asking him questions, about his past, about maintenance, about service. He answered humbly, teaching them tricks he'd learned long ago. By Friday, they weren't mocking him anymore. They were listening. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, James packed up his cleaning supplies and started heading home. He was surprised to see Admiral Pierce waiting by the gate, dressed casually this time, holding a small paper bag. "Evening, Mr. Holt," she said with a smile. "Thought I'd drop this off. Some books for Emily. You mentioned she liked planes." He took the bag gently, glancing inside. Old aviation manuals, flight stories, even a children's encyclopedia of aircraft. "She'll love these," he said quietly. "Thank you." Catherine nodded, then looked at him thoughtfully. "You know," she said, "I think our first meeting deserves a redo. No uniforms, no jokes, just dinner between friends." James chuckled softly. "That sounds a lot better than a prank date." Friday night, he agreed. As she walked back to her car, James stood for a moment, feeling the evening breeze brush against his face. He thought about the strange turn his life had taken, a cruel joke that had led to something unexpectedly kind, something real. When he got home, Emily ran to the door, leaping into his arms. "How was work, Daddy?" He smiled, holding her close. "It was good, sweetheart. Some people finally learned how to clean properly." She laughed, resting her head on his shoulder. "You always make everything better." As he looked out the window toward the fading lights of the base, James felt a deep calm settle over him. For the first time in years, he wasn't just the janitor or the widower. He was seen, for who he truly was. And somewhere, in that gentle quiet, a single dad felt the weight of the world grow just a little lighter.